be here in Bucharest. It's always one of my great favorite parts of being party president, to travel through European countries, experiencing a particular history, and through that, all that binds us together. So, having been here for a day or two in Romania, I ask all of you, being so proudly Romanian, did you really fight that hard for your freedom, independence and respect, just to pass it on to the unelected, uncharismatic and undemocratic elite in Brussels? I believe not. So dear friends, it is indeed a great pleasure to stand before you here today at this event in the Romanian capital. Because the battle for Europe has started, and I can assure you that the Eurocrats will indeed fight back. One day, it can be a lawsuit or rather a political show trial with full accusations of fraud or any other baloney. Another day, it can be a leftist mayor's wish to silence conservative parties from across Europe. That's actually what happened in Brussels a couple of weeks ago, when the police, 2 hours into the NatCon conference, attempted to clear the room where Nigel Farage, Eric Zemmour and Viktor Orban were invited to give speeches. In the coming weeks, we will undoubtedly see more of it, simply because our opponents are trembling in fear, and because the EU as such doesn't build on, doesn't reckon, and doesn't understand democracy. And I assure you, we are ready to fight back. This isn't just about an election. This isn't just about another term in the European Parliament. I believe this is about the future of our European civilization. Truly, we are at a crossroad at our continent. On the one side, the federalists, believing that the EU shall turn into a new version of the Roman Empire, with everything being governed by an elite in Brussels, far from common men and women of Europe. And on the other hand, we find us, the true Europeans, believing in our long tradition, our Christian heritage, our proud nation states, and genuine feeling of being united in a common interest, not in an ideology of Europe, but in a common interest of our values. Therefore, a common interest of fighting back. Fighting back against the bureaucracy of Brussels, but not only that, because the world we're living in does face us with greater evils even. Fighting back against the new united axis of evil, China, Iran, and Russia together, pushing for a new world order, a world order of terrorism, communism, and totalitarianism. Yet, in this world, Brussels doesn't understand one crucial thing: that the EU is too small to stand alone against these mighty powers. And the EU right now, with its maniac ideology of centralization, is splitting our countries more than uniting. And maybe worst of all, the EU ideology as such is failing. I mean, honestly, what have the Eurocrats offered our populations? A bureaucracy that lies like a suffocating blanket over the European economies in a time when inflation and in some places outright recession have plagued the European economies. A chaotic and damaging migration policy where the newly adopted EU migration pact is completely ineffective and most likely counterproductive. The borders remain open, and the out-of-control migration threatens the cohesion of our European fatherlands, while gigantic sums of taxpayers' money are end up in bottomless pits. A new 2015 looms in the horizon. Last year, 300,000 migrants entered the EU illegally. 1.1 million applied for asylum. In January this year alone, 100,000 migrants arrived, so it doesn't take many mathematical skills to multiply that number by 12. In Germany, Merkel said in 2015, "Wir schaffen das." I think today, most Europeans are more prudent than Merkel was back then. And maybe we should say today, in a voice that she can understand, "Nein, wir schaffen das nicht. Wir wollen das nicht." Because Europe is not a laboratory of crazy multicultural ideas. It is the fatherland of the Europeans, from Danes in the north to proud Romanians in the center of Europe. Brussels always accused populist parties, as they say, of not having solutions, only phrases. But the truth is rather that only we do have the answers. The truth is that the established parties have consistently refused to adjust their political course and listen to the regular men and women of Europe. Therefore, the time calls for concrete political action, and only our parties are concrete. We demand seal off Europe's border against migration. We demand repatriation of all boats with migrants to their harbors of origin. We demand asylum processing in third countries in accordance with the Australian model with asylum proceedings in Rwanda, and I do congratulate the United Kingdom that fought for its freedom now to do the same thing. We demand massive repatriations of migrants who refuse to integrate and commit serious crime. And we demand the return of power to the elected national parliaments. Democracy can only exist in spaces where we speak the same language, where all citizens can partake in the discussions and thereby in power and in the debates of democracy. And that is not, dear friends, what is happening in Brussels. Today's event shows to the world that we take politics very seriously. We will, and we can, and we shall make this great continent even greater. And I'm proud to represent a party from Denmark that has been a pioneer in the fight against the EU's creeping takeover of our sovereignty now for almost 30 years. In the Danish People's Party, we showed the way very early on, and we inspired parties all around on our great continent. We left lasting marks. Today, in the ID group and our great friends in the ECR group, we are aware of our responsibility. We know that the European populations invest great hopes in our common struggle. It has often been said that so-called far-right parties traditionally have had difficulty incorporating. But I truly believe that these great groups to which we belong will claim that to be false. Our groups could be about to take over a quarter of the seats in the European Parliament after the election, June the 9th. That doesn't necessarily mean that we also will have part in the power in the European Parliament, but it certainly means our group will make its marks on the other groups, and that the Europe's populations will feel a difference. We simply cannot be ignored in European politics anymore. I served 10 years in the European Parliament. Beginning in 2009, I remember how we, the EU critics, were radicalized by the federalists. Later on, they stopped ridiculing us, and they simply ignored us. Then came Brexit, and they couldn't ignore us anymore. No more ridicules or ignores us now. So, with the great words of Madame Thatcher, who back in the 90s said, I want my money back from Brussels. Let's echo that and ask, fight and struggle. We want our countries back. Thank you.